So the gameplay footage in this video is from the alpha playtest that happened in LA back in spring of 2024, where a bunch of other content creators were there. And I'm sure that things have changed drastically since then, but I haven't played the game at all, PoE 2 that is, since that playtest, so I'm not really sure what's to come, but I do want to reflect on the things that I felt back then, kind of watch this video back over with you guys. Gonna just be freestyle watching this, because to be honest, when I first got back from that trip, I don't know why, but mysteriously extremely hungover and uncomfortable to the point that I didn't know how to plug in my flash drive to my PC. And because of that, I never really fully rewatched this footage until really recently, like right now, as I'm, recording this. So I basically have a list of 6 or 7 things that I want to talk about as far as broad topics go. And the first thing I'll talk about is what this build is. So this build is a witch that constantly dies, but it's actually a spark lightning warp combo. So I really wanted to try to be as simple as possible during this initial playtest as far as what skill I was going to use, because we had limited time. So I decided to use Spark, kind of a classic. Now Spark in and of itself, I actually really liked how it looked. And I really liked how it moved around the screen, far better than it is in PoE 1 as far as just, the aesthetic of it. But it was really lacking in terms of both damage and its ability to clear packs. So the way that I do most of my clearing in this gameplay is with combining that skill with Lightning Warp. And Lightning Warp is not like it used to be. It can only be used on low life enemies. It's basically like Culling Strike. But when you cull, it gives you a big ass lightning explosion that does more damage than your main skill. Really strong, and pretty much the only way that I was able to play in this playtest and actually kill packs of mobs when we were all feeling pretty weak, although I was probably feeling a little bit weaker than other people just because, bad at the game. I do think though that this is gonna be a little bit of foreshadowing for what's to come. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more sort of 2-button or combo-esque gameplay, and I don't see that as necessarily being a bad thing. So I think right now the way that we feel is that, in PoE 1, something like Desecrate, Detonate, Dead. We like a lot of the power, a lot of people like how it feels, but a lot of people are reluctant to play it because it's pretty much just saying I could play Wave of Conviction or something else similar, press 1 button, blast through, or I could play this 2-button build. But that 2-button build isn't really a 2-button build. It's just a 1-button build with 2 steps, There's not actually really anything interesting necessarily going on other than the fact that you need to accomplish this true combo all the time. But I think what the multi-skill things will look like much more in PoE 2 is that you have sort of default attacks you're using, and then you have other skills while you're clearing that are sort of conditional. Things like culling, things that are environmental, things to adjust certain mob types, and then also things to create, I guess, crowd control and generate opportunities for using utility. Recently, Alkaiser's been streaming a lot of ruthless gameplay on his Warden, the Glacial Hammer Warden, and I thought that build looked like trash. And it still looks like trash, to be honest. His damage is low, it's ruthless, so he's playing Glacial Hammer, strike skill, nothing super impressive. But his boss skills have looked really smooth, and a lot of his gameplay has looked really safe, despite having, mediocre defense, bad damage, and playing melee. And the reason is because Glacial Hammer on a Warden is really good at freezing monsters. I've been underrating freeze for a long time, and when I think about the gem options that were given to us as far as being available as a Sorc in PoE 2, a lot of them were about utility, and I neglected to use a lot of them, to create chill or freeze or, anything like that. I think things like knockback, things that pull in, things like Void Sphere, it's gonna be really something to pay attention to. I think that there's going to be a lot of sort of Mobkiting. If you want to play quickly, if you want to be a speedrun in PoE 2, my guess is that it's going to be a lot about managing your screen. Not just dying when you see a gigantic pack of monsters, but rather finding the angle ahead of time of where you want to kite, how you want to pull those monsters into another pack, and then blow them all up at the same time with some skill combination to be really efficient. Now this is a little bit more reminiscent of things like, I don't know, Diablo 3 or MMO gameplay, but I don't see this as necessarily being a bad thing. Now, games get crept all the time, both in terms of player power and monster power. In PoE 1, we've seen that in terms of density creep. It's one of the reasons why I can play Viper Strike and Mamba right now, with no melee splash and only +1 strike skills, and then just clear entire packs, because the density is so high that a mechanic like fixed range proliferation can be good. All that to say, I think that mob clear, just because it's not necessarily promised to be really simple moving forward, doesn't mean that's a bad thing. I think that when I look at this gameplay, I'm just bad, It's hard, for sure, but I'm so much worse at playing this game than the game is hard, if you know what I'm saying. Like watching this back, I think that if I was just better with my mouse and like, you know, use my eyes and brain, I would have played a lot better, and I think a lot of this gameplay could have looked really, really smooth in comparison. And if we're stronger now than we were during the alpha, well then, you know, it'll be a pretty big difference. Now, as far as all that goes, I think that the pace and power of this game, of PoE 2 as I tried it, was a little bit slow for my taste, but actually not that much slower than I'd want it to be. Things like movement from empty space to empty space is never a good thing. And I think a lot of why I might have felt that this was a bit more present was because my character was slow, and that I was running zones over and over again because I kept dying and really didn't progress that far, to be honest. But I do think that moving slower can be okay as long as we're constantly doing something. The first couple playthroughs at least will give you opportunities to just look at things like terrain, monster type, absorb that sort of information. So even if you're a bit of a power player, I don't think you should be so fixed on like needing constant combat, constant dopamine. On everyone's first playthrough, I personally think everyone should be going for the long run approach. That's to say, look at the monsters, what they're doing, what their attacks are, what their patterns are. I've been playing PoE probably since Breach League. Casually, on and off, you know, I used to just play SC, get a head hunter, quit the league, you know, just 1 week of gameplay at a time. But back in like 3.16, I'd say, I probably started, you know, playing a little bit more in terms of racing, HC, that sort of thing. And during Scourge Gauntlet, I remember that I was, you know, moving pretty fast. I discovered this DD Ignite thing that Rutu linked me before the event started. And I was, you know, really juicing, and I was really proud of myself. I was like, oh, I'm so fast. Look how fast I am, you know, every moment I was like, I'm doing well, you know, I can probably catch up to Ben. Not knowing just how big of a gap there was in terms of everything, game knowledge, bossing, whatever. The thing that I died to during that gauntlet was a pack of cannibals in an atoll map as I was shield charging. I was playing a block necro, and I realized at that point that I knew nothing. I thought it was a fire spell, and I'm pretty sure it's like a fizz attack or maybe like a fizz convert attack. And that cannibals are dangerous, especially with multi-proj. But at the time, because I never paid attention to monsters as I was playing through softcore, you know, I would just brute force things or zoom through and not really look at what I was fighting. I didn't actually have the game knowledge for what I was, you know, gonna be confronting later in my, I guess, like career, you could say, in PoE. So I think on your first playthrough of PoE, try to be very mindful, conscious, you know? It's okay to like have space, have time to think, walk from place to place. I don't even know if we're gonna get that, but I hope it's there. I hope it kind of breeds more mindfulness in me. The other thing I'm really excited about in this game is bossing. Recently, most recent Gauntlet was the most fun I've ever had. Fighting Uber Maven was literally the single most fun I've ever had playing Path of Exile. Normally when you do boss mechanics in PoE, even Uber bosses, mechanics tend to happen probably in the range of about an 8 to 10 second mark in terms of important mechanics that you need to react to. It felt like during the Maven fight, they were happening between every 2 to 5 seconds, which is so much faster, especially when a lot of those mechanics are straight up lethal for your build. But that sort of thing is much better for me. I think that it gets my adrenaline going way more. It doesn't necessarily feel unfair, it just changed the mindset of how you're playing. When I play like MMOs, I'm really parse obsessed, you know? But I'm not really thinking about, you know, clearing that much, because I guess I just repeat fights a lot and it's really like that. But when you're doing something that's a little bit harder, you know, there's more challenge, there's more dodging, there's more paying attention to what your screen is, you know, shooting at you. I think it can actually be really, really rewarding to not worry so much about things like uptime, DPS, boss time to kill, that sort of thing, and just enjoy playing the game, enjoy dodging. So I really hope that PoE 2 is going to have a lot more of that, and I do think it will. A lot of the bosses that we did see in PoE 2 just have a lot more deliberate dodging. You don't need to be so, you know, rushed about getting your DPS off. I've yet to see real enrage mechanics that are that oppressive, especially during the campaign. So I think that having more opportunities to deliberately dodge is going to be really exciting. Yeah. Last thing I want to talk about was, I guess, like, how good will PoE 2 be? You know, a lot of people think like, oh, what do you think about PoE 2? I know you love PoE 1. Like, yeah, PoE 1's my favorite game of all time, probably. All right, it's not much of a surprise there. I think that PoE 2 is gonna be the best ARPG ever. And I say that as someone who has a lot of fear going into that game, you know? Obviously right now in PoE 1, I feel like really confident. I feel like I'm pretty skilled at the game mechanically. I feel like I know a lot. There's a lot of crude knowledge. I'm pretty comfortable with the landscape, that sort of thing. But PoE 2 is going to be a lot of uncertainty, a lot of new things, a lot of discovery, a lot of failure. And I think as soon as I'm able to confront that and kind of reckon with myself about those opportunities to fail, I see that it provides actually a much better chance to finally do all the things that I guess like Chris and Jonathan have talked about and Mark have talked about over the years. think back to 3.15. When Expedition came out in PoE 1, it was probably the most, I want to say, hated patch that I had played through at the time. People were getting destroyed left, right, ailments had been changed so that you couldn't have like chill freeze immune on your flasks anymore. People were getting absolutely pounded. It felt like fizz damage was super insane. Expedition monsters were way too powerful. Our reservations had been completely shifted. Spellslinger became basically unplayable that patch, even though I league started with it. Absolutely idiotic thing to do. But I would argue that 3.15 was the single most important patch that PoE has had in at least the past 3 years. It created so many opportunities to once again become strong again. You know, in 1.3, 1.4, we were really powerful. Harvestcraft and Ultimatum's base game, I think we were just really powerful with the tools that we were equipped with. But 1.5 scaled us all back, and I think that a lot of people have forgotten how important that patch was. These days, we're getting things like Necro Settlers, or like Necropolis League in general, or, you know, I guess Recombinators and Settlers. And these things are really fun to play with temporarily, but it's a degree of borrowed power which is absolutely insane. You know, the types of characters that we're creating now are just so ridiculous, and there's only so much space to move upwards in PoE at this point. You could do a gigantic stat squish, not just numerically, but like just like, you know, pull everyone backwards, make everyone weaker. But I think we're starting to reach the point in PoE 1 where, unless there's like really new content being added, or there's a really deliberate attempt and, I guess, I would say political will, but just like general community opinion that it's gonna be okay to just peel back a lot of player power in a lot of different places, you know, maybe like removing suppression, let's say. We're just so strong now, and it's always hard to peel back power. So starting fresh with a brand new game, I think gives Guardian Gear a lot of opportunity to sort of finally realize their vision. I mean, we meme about it, we joke about like vision this, vision that, but there's a lot of things that could be really cool about this. I think as long as like we're working with the same scaling systems, working with the same crafting systems, working with the same degree of receptiveness to player feedback, being cognizant of all the parties they're talking about, there's just no way that PoE 2 won't be at least the second best ARPG of all time. There's no question about that. I mean, even when I think about something as simple as, what do they cater to? I don't know the answer. It's a question that I've been asking for pretty much since as long as I've been streaming PoE, which is like, who do they balance around? Because at one point there was mention that the game is balanced around softcore trade, but there's no way that's true, right? Because if the game was balanced around softcore trade, we would not have the damage that we have. We would not even have the defense that we have. Crafting wouldn't be the way that it is. MFing wouldn't be the way that it is. And it still is, right? So there's actually a lot of balancing that I think is partly frenetic in a sense of like an Aristotelian sense, like just in terms of like, you know, getting a sense of, you know, what things are, just using their conventional wisdom. But I think there's also a lot of balancing that's quite deliberate and thinking about all the different things that are in the game, different kinds of player bases, who they're catering to. And I think that as difficult as it is to cater to more than one type of player, to think about all the different kinds of vignettes, hypothetical users, you know, and do that sort of prototyping, I think that Grinding Gear actually does a really good job of it when it comes to balancing the game. And so when it comes to PoE 2, this isn't just lip service. I really do think it's gonna be pretty damn goated. So, you know, hope to see you guys for the announcement tomorrow or today or whenever you're watching this. I think it's gonna be absolutely sick. Can't wait to start theory crafting a bunch of things, and let's hope to break this one as well.